I mean, we're often told, gosh, I read in, like Ann Landers and, the newspaper all the time, quotations about how all religions teach the same thing, and we're told that all religions teach love your neighbor as yourself. Is this true? I mean, does Islam teach to love your neighbor?
No, chapter 48, verse 29 of the Quran says, Muhammad is the apostle of Allah. Those who follow him are merciful to one another, but ruthless to the unbelievers. Now, that is a dichotomy that runs through Islamic tradition. There is no idea of the universal dignity of the human person. There's no idea that all people, as creatures of God, have an equal dignity. There's a very sharp differentiation between believer and unbeliever. Yes, ma'am?
I just wanted, as surprising as that might be, I agree with you regarding the threat that the Christians, Arab, are living in the Middle East. As I said, I'm Christian Arab myself, and I think in Egypt, if they hadn't changed in the corruption way, the president wouldn't have won the election, and the Ikhwan al-Muslimin, which is the
I know what it is.
They would have won. I agree with that, and I don't want to live in a country that, I mean, I'm from Lebanon, so if Syria, we have a dictatorship, and I don't want to live there. I agree with that, and that's not the reason why I immigrated, because I got married. But I
Congratulations.
thank you. But I just feel that you're pessimistic regarding the spiritualization of Muslims. It's like it's something that could never happen, and like all Muslims could be a potential
I never
threat.
said it could never happen.
So
Never said that.
So what would it take for them to happen? Won't you think that the problem is more economical and educational? If we provide better education and less Quranic school, if the states leave Iraq be, and instead of bombing them, send schools there, shut down Quranic school.
Well, that's what we've been doing. And look how well it's worked.
I don't think so.
Yeah, sure. No, really.
Have you lived there?
No, I'm talking about Afghanistan.
Okay,
No, I've
well,
never lived
I've
in
lived
Afghanistan,
27
thank
years
God.
in the Middle East,
mashallah.
including Syria, Iraq, Jordan,
Yeah.
Lebanon. So.
No, what I'm addressing is not that point. What I'm addressing is your point about building schools.
Okay.
That, Bill, I told you that my family was from that area of the world. That's not, we can
How
play
come you have a
how
foreign
authentic.
name then?
Huh?
How come you have a foreign name then?
That's
You
not
changed
information
it.
I tell publicly.
You changed
Now,
it. Ooh, the evil Arab. Or
no,
because
this
you're
is my
in
original name.
denial after
I never
the
changed my name.
Yeah.
In Afghanistan, the United States military has been engaged in a massive social work operation. Massive. To build schools, to build hospitals, to build roads. And it's really an unprecedented thing for a military to do. This never happened before. And there's a book, what's it called, 3 Cups of Tea, I think, about building schools in Afghanistan. Very big movement. And it would seem then that would be that they are pursuing exactly the policy you're recommending. And I think that is the policy of the U.S. State Department, to try to counter this by means of education, by means of programs to alleviate poverty, and so on. And so the difficulty becomes that this has been tried, and I think it has failed. Now, we could continue to try to do the same thing and see if it starts to work. But I think that the record is clear. It's been several years. It's been how long? 7 years since we've been in Afghanistan now. And things are worse than ever. And a lot of those schools have been blown up by the Taliban. A lot of them have been taken over because, you've got to find personnel then who are going to teach the values you want to teach. And they're thin on the ground in Afghanistan. And so a lot of them have been co-opted and become essentially Quranic schools, and schools that teach hatred of America and hatred of Jews and Christians and the necessity to wage the jihad and so on. Now, am I saying that there could never be any kind of transformation? No, I never have said that, never. But I think that the odds are very slim, and that that's not, your opinion may differ, I'm sure it does, but it's not a pessimistic thing. It's a assessment of the obstacles that this kind of thing faces. If you're going to go all this trouble to build schools and then they get blown up, or then they get taken over by the people who teach the doctrines that have caused the trouble in the first place, then you're not addressing the problem correctly.
What's the answer to that? Like, should we divide the word, not let the Muslim in the state?
No, I've never said anything like that.
Kill them
No,
all?
I don't advocate anything of that kind. I think that what I'm saying is what I've said before here today, that we need to try to build a coalition on the basis of a shared value system, of a shared understanding of human rights that we all revere. That we will find many Muslims who would support us if we came out strongly for the freedom of speech, the freedom of conscience, equality of rights, and so on. And it wouldn't matter what Islamic law said, because so many of them live in areas where they understand these values, enjoy these values, and don't want to lose them to Sharia, to Islamic law being imposed. And the problem is that the US government has never done that. Never. As a matter of fact, Islamic law is the highest law of the land in Iraq and Afghanistan according to the constitutions that the US government sponsored and put in there. And so that's just stupidity on a massive scale. That comes from Noah Feldman, who's a scholar from Harvard, right? Who wrote the Constitution for Iraq. He doesn't know anything about Sharia. He wrote a long piece about Sharia in the New York Times, and he never once mentioned the Zumma, the Dhimma, the treatment of non-Muslims under the Islamic system. And yet, the fact that those laws are very much still alive in those areas, insofar as there are any non-Muslims left in a place like Afghanistan, was illustrated by the Abdurrahman case. Yes. Abdurrahman was a Muslim who became a Christian in Afghanistan in 2005, and he was arrested and put on trial for his life. And you should have seen the State Department spokesman trying to be nice and smile and saying, we want to remind the Karzai government that the Afghan constitution protects the freedom of religion, and so this man should be free. And the Karzai government said, the constitution protects the freedom of religion, but it also says Islamic law is the highest law of the land. And so it's kind of like Henry Ford used to say. You remember? Well, I know you're not as old as I am, but anyway, Henry Ford used to say, you can have any color car you want as long as it's black, because he only made black cars. And so in Afghanistan, you have freedom of religion. You can have any religion you want as long as it's Islam. And Abdurrahman was put on trial for his life, indicating that the death penalty for apostasy, part of Islamic law that many people would argue is a dead letter, many people do argue is a dead letter in the West, it's still very much alive for the people in Afghanistan and many other places in the Islamic world as well. And so we have to deal with that realistically, and I think if we called upon all people in the world and said, look, we're fighting for is for freedom of conscience. What we're fighting for is for the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which protects the human spirit and says that everybody has the right to change his religion or have no religion at all.
Well, if you're fighting for the human rights and all this, what's the state doing in Saudi Arabia? They were the one who did 9/11.
Yeah.
So I think that bugs me. I think that's hypocrisy by itself, just because the fuel is there. So I don't think it's about religion as much as about
I'm not a spokesman for the US government. I think they've made a lot of mistakes, and one of them is being allied with Saudi Arabia. Yeah.
Have there been, on her point, has there been any research that has looked into the links between poverty and terrorism? I mean,
there's been a lot.
Does poverty cause terrorism, like we're always told?
No, actually, no, Eric. In fact, there have been many studies over the years, and you can find records of them at Jihad Watch if you go and search for poverty causes terrorism, or maybe even study after study, because I tend to say, I know that I've said it a million times over the years, study after study has shown, and I link the studies on those words, that jihad terrorists tend to be better educated and wealthier than their peers. And also, of course, there was a time in history, and here we have another historical example, but I think it's pertinent in this case, you may differ, that the great Islamic empires of history, you go back 1,000 years or so, and they were far superior, economically, militarily, culturally, to Europe. And yet they were still waging jihad. They didn't think, oh, we're rich now, we don't have to wage jihad because poverty causes terrorism. As a matter of fact, when they got to be poor, when the Ottoman Empire collapsed, when the Muslims in India were under the rule of the British, that's when they didn't wage jihad. When they didn't have the resources to do so. When the Saudis struck oil, it became a different story.
So what's your name? Your real name?
Robert Spencer, yes. My real name from birth, yes. Never changed it, yes.